So that's the show today, and I'm ready to take questions and answer with my colleague Joseph Brewer. And John, if you want to take over, I will turn this back over to you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mark. I know we've got something on the chat already. I think there was a question early on around whether the total recordable incident rate included traffic incidents and deaths to and from the work. And I think given what you were saying about the fact that there were so many people to move around that the bus drivers had to be bussed to the bus depot before they could then bus the workers and such like. And noting here that the Jubail Highway is one of the most dangerous in the world. So I don't know whether that's one for you or for Joseph, but I know it's a very specific one.
I'll let Joseph take that because he knows exactly where the line was drawn, and we had a pretty broad line. So go ahead, Joseph.
It's an excellent question. The total recordable incident rate Mark showed was our construction and laydown site. It was the physical piece of the land that we managed. And it is true that when people left our site, they left our management and jurisdiction. They were out on those Jubail highways, and the Jubail highways are very dangerous, and there were fatalities and wrecks. They involved my employees, they involved contractor employees, they involved Sadara employees. Very unfortunate, but that is the answer to your question. We did take efforts to try to influence the roads around the Jubail industrial area, and we were quite successful in liaisoning with the local governing agencies. But we didn't reduce all the risk out there.
It is worth mentioning, Joseph, that just as a form of measure, when you start thinking about industrial risk, industrial accidents, you stand a higher chance of dying as a lawyer in an office in the United States than you did on the Sadara job site. And that's quite a testimonial considering how dangerous that work can be.
Agree.
So just moving on. Thanks for the answer and the clarification around that. As I say, by all means, people on the webinar do raise other questions that you want answered on the chat or raise your hand function. But in the meantime, I'm just thinking about the last slide that you put up in terms of the guiding questions. And just sort of thinking about, I mean, it'd be all too easy to say, to answer those by going, yes, it's all fine, yeah, we know what we're doing, so how do you get the rigor into, really getting the answers with the understanding and the verification behind them, recognizing particularly that with so many different contractors involved, prime E&Cs, many different cultures, some of those would be predisposed to probably wanting to give you the answer that they felt you expected all of the time, sort of thing. So what's the process that you work through to absolutely drill down and get satisfied that yes means yes?
I'll say two things, then I'll turn it over to Joseph. The first thing is, well, I'll tell you, working for Joseph, he's a Texan through and through, but he's also got a little bit of Missouri in his attitude, which is okay, fine, show me. And so that's the show me state. And, when I went out and worked with these teams, you're exactly right, John. Some people would say, hi, that yes, I understand, but it's like, okay, show me. So it's about, as I said earlier in my presentation, when you listen for things, a lot of the mischief is using the same word and meaning different things by it. And when they say it's done, you say, okay, can you give me an example of what you mean by done? And they say, well, I sent the email. Say, okay, well, that's not the example I was looking for. And that's really where we would go. And you learn as you go and how to press into it and say, we're not getting the results we want. So people must not be understanding the questions as well as we'd hoped. Joseph, you got something good to add to that?
No, that's actually a perfect answer. That would be my answer. one of the most powerful tools a leader has is the old management by walking around. But what does that really mean? It means that you walk around and everybody you meet, you ask those questions Mark's talking about. How did it go today? Did you understand the procedure? And you just ask simple questions. And ultimately you say, okay, show me that valve. You know, how did we get the torque specs on that valve? And you just keep asking simple little questions and you'll learn amazing amounts of information about your organization, how it's working.
Okay.
I would add
Great.
one other thing though, in the penultimate bullet you see there, if we have a breakdown because of unforeseen circumstances. One of the things we did on Sadara, and actually we integrated that even earlier in the work we did with Joseph on the Kuwait project, is the after action review. So when something broke down in terms of a work process or something like that, we said, all right, what happened?
You still there, Mark?
Uh-oh, Mark.
He's frozen.
Uh-oh, he's frozen.
Yeah. Well, just while we wait for Mark to...
I could probably finish his answer.
Okay, go for it, Joseph.
He was talking about after action debriefs, and every time we completed let's say a first set of handover of systems to operations, we would gather everybody in a room and say, what did we learn from that experience? Now, this is after the alignment session, after everybody's clear on the work process, everybody understands the tools, they've all checked the box, right? Then you sit down again and you say, how did it go? Were there any rough edges? Any supplemental training that we need to do? Are there new people in the room that don't have the training that we went through before? You know, after action debriefs to me is part of that learning organization that's absolutely critical when you're going to have a very large project. All the learning that goes from one group, you try to pass on to the next. And those after action debriefs are excellent.
Okay, I think we temporarily lost Mark. So in true contingency planning mode, Joseph, I'm going to ask questions of you now, I'm afraid. So
we've got another question here in the chat, right?
Yeah, there's a good question here on the chat. So from I'm hearing the recommendation to hold a series of alignment meetings to ensure that staff is focused on the project culture, goals, etc. It seems to be that this may represent a lot of coordination time. Would it be better perhaps to have a robust new employee orientation so as to allow the other workers to continue adding value and not have to attend additional meetings?
Let me say yes, and no. First off, alignment sessions are very critical, but as Mark mentioned in his presentation, they are not one-time events. They're actually a series of alignment sessions that are carried on throughout the project with special emphasis on the transition points in the phasing of project. So that part's true. The other yes is though, and you hit the nail on the head, new member orientation is something that's underestimated often. We put a lot of effort to it, and Mark and I agree, we probably did not put enough effort into it. And I can show you the material that we had, expecting our project managers to sit down with every new member, spend half a day and say, here's our background, here's how we got where we are, here's how we're going to make decisions. So new member orientation is vital. And it's something I always end my presentation with. I wish I could have done a better job. And it's because people who, if they come in at the beginning of construction and they're on the systems turnover and they haven't had the history of the project, then they are really missing a lot. And they have internal momentum coming from their last job and their career that's going to lead them in a certain direction that may be slightly off calibration with the program that you're leading. And so that new member orientation is a lot of FaceTime, eye to eye, make sure that person understands. Now, but I don't think you can, the no is, I don't think you can just have everybody get aligned at one time and say that's it. We don't intend to drag the the existing team into new member orientation sessions. That's not the intent. The intent of the new member orientation session is that that person gets up to speed with the team and can merge into the team without disruption. And yes, hopefully that's done with the team continuing to do their job. So the spirit of what you're asking is the intent. But it's a lot of effort. I'm sure I said it at the last presentation, you know, the hard stuff is easy. It's that soft stuff. And this is the kind of soft stuff that many project leaders underestimate the amount of calories they have to put into it. So
that's kind of what I was going to come on to. I'm just going to let Mark back in. He obviously dropped out and is returning. But this business of you know, hard skill, soft skill areas, and just thinking back to, I think one of the things that Mark mentioned early on in the presentation was that the organisation effectiveness was one of the 17 functional teams, and whilst you can no doubt put a lot of you know, hard black and white process in place around how you want organisational effectiveness to work, ultimately I guess the success of that team, that functional team's work itself would relate or rely to some extent on the maturity of the organizations that you're dealing with, and presumably on a giga project of that size and scale, you've got organizations that span a bit of a spectrum from those that are extremely mature and well versed and well experienced, and some who aren't quite at that point. So so does that mean you end up having to take a kind of horses for courses approach depending upon which individual contractor you're dealing with?
I'm back, Joseph, but I think you heard the full question and I'd like to see you respond to it. Sorry, pardon me for that.
Let me see what I can toss back to you. Let's see. Well, John, you're absolutely right. Let me start with, and I know we have contractors on, and my intention is not to badmouth contractors, but my experience is about 1 out of 20 contractors. I'm going to use contractors first, but we'll come to owner teams here in a second. 1 out of 20 contractors will tell you what they can do. They can sell very well, but when they get out on the work front, they fall apart. They literally fall apart. They cannot plan a day's worth of work or a week's worth of work and get it done. And you have to intervene quickly. Now let's go to the owner's team. Yeah, as you're leading a large program like this, and we had 27 project teams, you're going to find a project team that's lagging behind on these soft skills. They might be lagging behind on soft and hard skills. And the worst thing you can do is just monitor for a while. Monitoring is gets very, very dangerous at that point. What you have to do is intervene quickly. And Mark in particular has been, I've walked into his space a few times and said, Mark, I need some personal intervention with this leader or with this team or these two individuals who can't seem to get along. What do you suggest? You know, and we'll devise a small, quick intervention plan to go in and try to get teams up to speed and point it in the right direction. I don't know that we're 100% successful all the time on those, but you know, if your interventions are not planned, intentional, and relatively quick, there's a good chance they won't be effective. So that's what we do with teams that lag behind. Mark, you've helped on that. So
I took a phrase away from that, Joseph, which is come way back in our time together, which is on a project, time is never your friend. You're always fighting it, and you can't sneak up on a problem. You know, you gotta identify it and come straight at it as fast as you can. And so those are the things that we carried in our left hand as we went into a room. Of course, it was either a bat or sometimes a feather duster, depending upon what the approach was needed when you went into that room. But we always approached it from, you know, time's not your friend and you can't sneak up on a problem.
Okay, thanks guys. So we've got a few minutes left. I can't see any other questions on the chat, so I'm just going to continue to ask you about things that are on my mind. And I know some of these things are on the minds of ECRI's sponsors as well, particularly, you know, just having gone through the last year of operating in very challenging circumstances. You know, I think in a handful of cases, work on construction sites was stopped, but my sense is that in the majority of cases, work was able to continue, albeit at a probably frustrated rate. And you know, we've seen a lot of change in terms of how we do what we do because of restrictions that have been imposed. And the feeling and the sense amongst many of our members is that some of these changes are here to stay. Maybe not 100%, but to some degree. So, you know, aspects like remote working are undoubtedly here to stay, and companies are evaluating how much, you know, office space do we need to do our home office activities when we've proved that we can do a lot of this stuff remotely. And then, you know, by the time you then think about how the job flows through to the job site itself, I know that a number of these projects have been frustrated by their inability to second people from one country to the job site country itself. And they've had to find ways of working around that and bringing people within the country of the project itself up into some of those key leadership positions, to the point that there's a sense that, you know, the overseas assignment for the construction phase will probably not happen to the extent that it has done historically. So again, I'd just like your sort of thoughts and your reflections in and around that, because I know in particular, you know, Joseph, you're a big advocate of you need to get people in the room as and when, you know, the circumstances dictate, and you tackle things on a war room type basis. But the reality is people haven't been able to do that. So how do we move forward with some of these, you know, changes to our whole mindset and paradigm that are going to be stuck with us on a go forward basis? Sorry, big question.
That's yours, Mark.
Oh, he actually said Joseph and the war room. Well, as I said earlier.
Well, no, to be fair, Mark, I probably asked Joseph this question last year as well.
Okay.
So we'll give it to you, Mark.
So here's the thing that I see about this is nobody's got the best method for it, but there are a bunch of tools that are coming into play that people are starting to use, like Mural and Cardsmith and things like that allow them to have synchronous interactions with a whiteboard where they can physically put it together. But we're all learning as we go. You know, how many times have we been on a call when a kid or a dog comes running into the room, and you know, that's just a reality of it. And so a lot of people try to, like, oh, just ignore that man behind the curtain. And it's, you know, it's part of the deal. So as we start looking for this integrity, we look for what I'll call the next normal. And the next normal is, people are saying, oh, when we go back. I don't think we're going back. I think we realize this is how much we can do remotely for certain things. We don't necessarily need to fly out there for everything. I don't think face-to-face is gone forever, but I think we have realized that, you know what, if I can attend some of these meetings and we're better with these tools than we've ever been, this is something that people are going to do, and they are starting to embrace it. They haven't gotten it worked out, but they are starting to embrace it. But I know I gave kind of a brief answer to that question, but I saw another one come up from Xanthi, and I just feel like I want to hear Joseph answer this question. So I'll read it to him if he doesn't have it in front of him. But
I see it.
Yeah. So maybe for everybody who's attending, Joseph.
What do I think is the best tool that I've found to get owners and developers on board with the amount of time and costs that must be put into effective plan and transition? I don't know that there is a best tool. I will say this, that, and I think I learned this from Mark as early as the mid 2000s on the Kuwait work we did together, one of the things we found most effective in transition management is identifying those natural leaders on the project team, whatever their role is. You know, they could be a purchasing agent, they could be a project engineer, they could be a piping lead or whatever. Get those natural leaders and appoint them to a small transition leadership team, separate or apart from their normal work. And then say, go out, have them then poll the broader teams about what are their concerns about this transition, what are the big issues, what questions do they have that we don't have answers to. And it's amazing to watch these natural leaders go about doing what they do very, very well every day. And they can put together a transition plan that not only you can endorse, but the broader teams at the working level can endorse as well, because you've used people right out of their midst. And that's not a tool, but that's a method that really has worked effectively for us.
Yeah. So I have something, having done this kind of business for 20 years, that it does start with the leadership. And, you know, if you go to the leader and they see, as I pointed out earlier, the work, rework, coordination, decision weight, and you go to the leader and they understand the instability of a transition. And if you lay out a good case, as an engineer should, that said, we're going to spend all this money recycling, or we're going to go spend some money and go through once and do it right. And if you get a leader like Joseph who sees the wisdom in that, he says, okay, yeah, no, do it. We're going to do that. And the thing that was very powerful is we were able to treat it like a spec. Like, okay, we don't tell you exactly what you do, but you better have a plan. I don't care if it's pizza and this and that and these meetings, but you got to have a plan, and you got to show the plan, you know, the show me. And so I think that that's, once you realize that you can spend your money badly and not get the outcome you want, or you can spend some money up front, which looks like, wow, an investment, it's a better way to use your money. You get a better result. And that's kind of what we're trying to talk about in this presentation today. As a completion, you got to do the pre-investment. You got to bring man reps on early. You got to do things like this.
Yeah, that came across loud and clear. So look, I'm conscious that we're over time now, and you know, we hate running over schedule. So so I'm going to call time out, but not before I say a big thanks to Mark in particular for running 2 sessions for us today. So very much appreciated, which helps us enormously to cover our sponsors all around the world. But also to Joseph again for your 3rd performance, really, with the ECRI community in recent months. So thank you very much to both of you, and I look forward to continuing to keep in contact with you both and see how we develop on these key areas that need managing for successful project management and risk management. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and especially for the teamwork in the systems failure time. That worked, you know, having each other's back.
No problem.
There you go.
Yeah,
That's
we can build.
See you guys.
See you guys.